Now, let me
You
ask
know.
you, and I'm getting more forceful and just jumping in.
That's all
What do
right.
you feel about the evangelists, ministers, and all who had all these scandals? Jim
Jimmy,
Baker,
Tammy, and all
Tammy
that.
Faye,
Yeah.
Jimmy Swaggart. Do you think it's a really a disappointment? Do you think do you just say, oh, that's human nature?
Well, yeah, I think part of what God is saying through all of that is that ministers are just as human as anyone else.
Probably.
Yeah,
Well, I
go
remember
ahead.
watching Jim Baker preach, and I would actually feel bad some of the things he would say. I said,
Yeah.
here's this clean, wonderful man, and I just felt like dirt compared to him. This is before the scandal.
Before
and I
the
said, wait a minute,
scandal.
he's doing more than I'm doing.
Yeah, the dishonesty in the funds was the real scandal
Oh, yeah.
there, the way I see it.
Yeah.
We are almost, our time's almost up.
I don't know. I'm not calling the shot here, but
Oh,
I thought
okay.
we can go forever. As,
Yeah,
they tell me
yeah.
we've been on a
I-
minute
oh,
and
we
45 seconds.
We got 5 minutes.
Oh,
we
well,
got
great.
5 fingers.
Suppose Johnny
From the floor
Carson's
director.
people called you tomorrow and said, Johnny's not going
Yeah.
to be here. Jay Leno dropped out. You got one show. You can have 3 guests. Anyone you'd like on the show, we'll get them for you.
If I was
Who would
gonna-
you pick?
Oh, that's wonderful. If I was going to pinch in for Johnny Carson,
And they said, get anyone you want.
any 3 guests that I want. Tammy Faye Baker would be the first one I'd ask.
Okay.
Tammy Faye and I together would be national news. And Tammy Faye, from what I understand, was very open and understanding and compassionate towards gay people. She had a gay minister on her show who had AIDS and was very supportive of him and acknowledged that he was a Christian. And this was before the scandal, for their fall. And she got a lot of flack because of it. But I think Tammy Faye would be the first person that would come to mind.
Now, what
And-
kind of, what do you think of some of the new comedians that are getting so much criticism? Andrew Dice Clay, Sam Kinison. Have you heard of any
No,
of
I
them?
haven't heard of that.
Oh, you haven't?
I can't
well,
answer that.
what about like Eddie Murphy? How do you feel about using foul language to make a comedy point? Do you,
On television, I'm kind of down on it. Now, like in a cabaret, where you're working to an adult nightclub audience is one thing. But on television, when you're going into people's homes with all ages, I think they should cool it a little bit.
Okay, I agree. Now, suppose you had a bonus and could have a guest on who has passed away. Someone's dead. You could bring him back and talk to him for 10 minutes.
Well,
Who
that'd
would
be
you
Catherine Kuhlman.
Catherine Kuhlman.
Oh, definitely.
Oh.
Oh, yes. That without question.
Do you feel a lot of these people's spirit is still out there that you
Yes.
can
Oh,
communicate with them?
definitely. No
'Cause
question.
We did a show where we talked to psychics, and everyone believed that you could communicate with someone who'd passed on.
I think you can. Yeah, I've never really gotten into that heavy, but I do believe it's entirely possible. And I don't believe that it's all evil like the evangelicals say it is. I have a very strong metaphysical side to me also. And my preaching is basically sort of a blending of the Pentecostal, charismatic, and metaphysics.
I thought maybe you might say you'd want to talk to Elvis. Now, I know you're
No,
involved
not
with the
really.
Church of Elvis. And
That was I am not into worshiping Elvis. The Church of Elvis thing that I did was strictly a fun, artsy thing. And they're really not Elvis worshipers or a cult. It's strictly a fun, artsy
I
thing
see.
that they put together that's a little out of the ordinary, where people who want to have a wedding that's a little bit different from the traditional thing. And but no, I've never really was that big of a fan of Elvis's when he was
Oh,
alive.
is that right?
To tell you the
Well, he was
truth.
very flamboyant and very religious, too.
Yes, he came from a Pentecostal background
Yes.
like I did, and but I never was a big fan of his. You know who I really, in the rock and roll scene, who I really related to was Janis Joplin.
Oh, yes.
Powerful, powerful person. I mean, it's tragic that she died of such a young age with the drugs and the alcohol problem. But when she was alive, she got rich doing what she loved to do. And her albums and her music are powerful. And, and of course, I relate to Janis Joplin because she grew up in a small town, Port Arthur, Texas, where she was the oddball, where she was made fun of. And when I grew up, in Gresham, Oregon, I was also considered the local oddball, and I was made fun of, although for different reasons than Janis Joplin. But both Janis Joplin and I knew that pain and that hurt from being in our growing up years, from being the one who was different and not asked to the proms, high school prom, and not a part of the social life of the schools.
Why were you made fun of when you were young?
Because I was so effeminate as a boy.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
When in 1952, when the publicity of Christine Jorgensen, who was the first publicized sex change, came out, all of the kids poked fun at me and called me Christine in my early years of high school.
Well,
and I was the local fairy, quote unquote, I guess. But Janis Joplin now was the hippie and the beatnik and all of that. But she knew the stigma trauma also, that same kind of pain. In the documentary they did of her life, they showed it when she went to her 10th high school class reunion, and those people really, you know, you could tell she was not one of them at all.
Well, someone's told me once, the ones that you make fun of in grade school and junior high school, those are the ones that you remember.
That's
and
right.
it's good that there is a show business for those of us who didn't quite fit into the norm.
Didn't fit into the norm.
Who don't feel like getting up in the morning and getting a briefcase
Yeah,
and going,
tell me.
there's a place to
For
go.
us.
Yes, between here and sitting on a curb with a wine bottle someplace, there's an alternative. What do you feel? Who do you feel you're talking to mostly out there? Who are your fans?
I'm talking to all people on this ministry. You know, I have the evangelicals, the church people watching, the non-church people, gay people, straight people. I get mail from all different kinds of people.
What kind of mail? Any crazy letters?
Once in a while I get a crazy letter, but most of the mail that I get is supportive.
If you had to choose now between going off into a comedy show business career or maybe getting your own church and your own ministry, which would you choose?
Oh, that's hard to say, because I believe that I can do both. You know,